Beloved, let us enter this moment with a stillness of heart, for something sacred is seeking to be disclosed. Not something to be added to you, not something to be achieved by effort, but something that has lived within you since the beginning, quietly waiting for you to recognize it. For centuries, humanity has searched for the light of God as though it were hidden in distant realms. Men and women have traveled to monasteries, studied ancient techniques, chased after teachings and teachers, hoping that somewhere, just somewhere, they might find the secret that will awaken the Christ within. And because the longing has been sincere, they have explored pineal gland activations, breathwork, mantras, esoteric rituals, and complicated systems of awakening. But I say to you, the simplicity of God is the stumbling block of the world. You see, the mind wants something to do, something to achieve, something to manipulate, something to change, because the mind believes that God is absent and must be summoned. The mind believes that the kingdom of God is locked behind some mystical door, and if only you find the right key, you will finally enter. Yet the Master said, the kingdom of God is within you, not beyond you, not after death, not in some future attainment, within you, now, here. And so we begin this sacred journey by acknowledging a profound truth. Christ consciousness is not awakened by technique. It is revealed by recognition. If you have come today seeking a method to force your way into spiritual illumination, you will be disappointed. For the Christ cannot be commanded by the human mind. The infinite cannot be coerced into activity by human effort. God does not respond to pressure, ritual, or manipulation. But if you have come with a heart willing to be still, if you have come with a soul ready to listen rather than ask, if you have come prepared to lay aside every belief that God must be found somewhere outside yourself, then you will discover something that has been waiting for you longer than you have known how to look. You will discover the presence. This presence is not activated. It is not summoned. It is not achieved. It is recognized, and it is this recognition that Joel Goldsmith devoted his entire life to revealing. He learned through experience, not through speculation, that God does not come to you because of your prayers, your meditations, your affirmations, your practices. God is already the substance of your being, and all spiritual progress is the gradual dropping away of the illusion that you must reach for what is eternally present. I say to you, with all the gentleness of spirit, you are not asked to climb to God. You are asked to rest in God. You are not asked to manipulate consciousness. You are asked to recognize consciousness as God. You are not asked to seek power. You are asked to acknowledge the presence that is the only power. So today we begin slowly, reverently, by turning away from the belief that there is something out there that must be attained. For every time you reach outward, you deny the omnipresence that is already here. Every time you search outward, you postpone the revelation that seeks to arise from within. So today we begin slowly, reverently, by turning away from the belief that there is something out there that must be attained. For every time you reach outward, you deny the omnipresence that is already here. Every time you search outward, you postpone the revelation that seeks to arise from within, practicing the presence, not practicing to get something, not practicing to fix something, not practicing to become something, but practicing in order to remember what already is. And so, beloved, as we begin, let us allow this truth to settle softly within us. The spiritual life is not the effort to attain God. It is the recognition that God has never been absent. When we stop striving, when we release the tension that seeks to drag God into our experience, when we simply rest in the awareness that where we stand is holy ground, then the Christ begins to make itself known to us, silently, gently, powerfully. And so, beloved, as we begin, let us allow this truth to settle softly within us. The spiritual life is not the effort to attain God. It is the recognition that God has never been absent. Beloved, let us gently enter deeper into this truth. For if we are to understand the practice that reveals the Christ within, we must first understand why so many seekers, with so much devotion, wander in circles without ever touching the living presence. It is not because they are unworthy. It is not because God is withholding anything. It is not because spiritual awakening is rare or difficult. It is simply this: humanity seeks effects, not cause. Look upon your own journey with compassion. How often has your spiritual effort been directed toward changing something in your outer world? You have prayed for health, believing that sickness was the obstacle. You have sought abundance, believing that lack was the barrier. You have longed for harmony, believing that discord was the enemy. You have asked for peace, believing that agitation was the problem. And yet the Master said, seek first the kingdom, not seek first the healing, not seek first the money, not seek first the answer. Seek the kingdom, seek the cause, seek the presence. My beloved, every time you attempt to fix the outer world before recognizing the inner, you are seeking second. And in seeking second, you unknowingly place the material world above the spiritual. You say to consciousness, you may serve me once I have arranged my circumstances. And in that moment, you reverse the order of reality. This is why the world suffers. This is why the seeker wanders. This is why prayers feel unanswered, because they are directed toward an effect, not toward the source that governs all effects. Joel Goldsmith discovered this by experience, not by theory. He found that the vast majority of human effort is spent trying to manipulate shadows. Health, wealth, relationships, success, these are the shadows of consciousness. They are the fruit of the tree, not the tree itself. And when you grasp at fruit without tending the root, the fruit withers in your hand. The kingdom is not found by trying to fix the appearance. The kingdom is found by recognizing the reality behind the appearance. But mankind, in its sincerity, continues to search outward. It seeks God in temples, in doctrines, in rituals, in secrets, in practices, in techniques. It believes that if only the right combination of spiritual behaviors is performed, the presence will finally descend. Listen now, for this is the correction that liberates. God does not come because you perform. God does not come because you strive. God does not come because you plead. God is. And because God is omnipresence, God cannot come to you. There is nowhere for God to come from. The illusion that God is absent is the only veil. And that illusion persists because the seeker believes the kingdom must be attained rather than unveiled. You see, the human mind assumes separation as its default condition. It believes life is a journey toward God. It imagines God as distant, as something to be found, reached, persuaded, or summoned. But this belief itself is the barrier. The truth is revealed only when the seeker stops seeking outside and turns within, realizing, I am standing in the midst of the kingdom, and I did not know it. This is why the simplest practice, the quiet acknowledgement of the presence, reveals more than all the techniques man has devised, because the presence is not created by your effort, it is recognized by your consent. But look how the world distracts the seeker. It says, meditate longer, affirm harder, visualize clearer, raise your vibration, activate your pineal gland, open your chakras, seek mystical experiences, and after all this striving, the seeker remains weary. still reaching toward what seems out of reach. Why? Because all these methods, however sincere, are built upon the assumption that something must be done to bring God near. Beloved, God is already nearer than near. God is your own consciousness, your own being, your own life. You have never been separated except in belief. Beloved, God is already nearer than near. God is your own consciousness, your own being, your own life. You see, the human mind assumes separation as its default condition. It believes life is a journey toward God. It imagines God as distant, as something to be found, reached, persuaded, or summoned. But this belief itself is the barrier. Beloved, God is already nearer than near. God is your own consciousness, your own being, your own life. Why? Because all these methods, however sincere, are built upon the assumption that something must be done to bring God near. This is why Joel Goldsmith taught that the greatest spiritual mistake is believing that God is separate, believing that God must be contacted, believing that God must be convinced. When you believe this, your entire spiritual life becomes a pursuit of the external. But when you see that the kingdom is already established within you, your spiritual life becomes a recognition, a relaxation, a resting in truth. The presence does not need activation. It needs acknowledgement. And so, the reason seekers miss the kingdom is not because they lack spiritual ability, but because they overlook the simplicity of the truth that stands in the midst of them. Spirit is already present. Consciousness is already whole. Christ is already here. We miss the kingdom only by looking beyond where it already is. Beloved, now that we have seen why humanity searches without finding, let us come to the heart of the teaching, the jewel, the essence, the living practice that Joel Goldsmith discovered after years of seeking. Questioning and inward listening, a practice so simple that the mind dismisses it, yet so powerful that it reveals the very presence of God. It is what Joel called practicing the presence. Now listen carefully, for this is not a practice in the ordinary sense. It is not something you do. It is not something you perform. It is not another spiritual method among many. It is a way of living, a way of being still, a way of remembering, a way of recognizing what is eternally true. Practicing the presence is the inner turning, the gentle, silent acknowledgement that right where I am, God is. Not metaphorically, not conceptually, not symbolically, but literally, spiritually, factually. The presence is here. The presence is now. The presence is within me. This is not prayer as the world understands prayer. This is not asking God to enter. This is not seeking God to act. This is not reaching outward for help. This is the direct recognition that God is already the life of your being, and that no separation has ever existed except as a belief in the mind. Let us understand this clearly. When the world prays, it prays to an external deity. It petitions a far-off God. It asks for intervention. It pleads for change. But in the infinite way, prayer is not petition. Prayer is not asking. Prayer is not persuading. Prayer is recognition. Recognition of an already present presence, an already complete wholeness, an already functioning grace. Practicing the presence means that in the midst of any moment, whether quiet or chaotic, you pause inwardly, even for a breath, and silently know, I and the Father are one. God is the substance of my being. Where I am, God is. Not as affirmations you are forcing, not as statements you are trying to believe, but as truth you are remembering. The mind may argue, the senses may deny, the emotions may resist. It does not matter. The Christ is not revealed through effort. The Christ is revealed through consent. Practicing the presence is the opening of the inner door, the lifting of the latch that the mind placed upon the heart. It is the sacred yielding, the relaxing into the awareness that God is not coming, God is. When Joel first discovered this practice, he realized that the presence had been with him all along, not because he was special, but because this is the nature of existence. Every soul carries within itself the full radiance of the Christ, but few ever pause long enough, quietly enough to feel it. And so the practice is simple. Be still, turn within, acknowledge the presence, rest in that acknowledgement, and let the silence reveal what the mind cannot. In this inner stillness, you do not think your way to God. You do not imagine your way to God. You do not speak your way to God. You listen, you watch, you wait without waiting. You sit in the gentle openness that says, Father, here I am. And in that stillness, something happens. Not always dramatically, not always immediately, but something begins to move, to breathe, to rise. A soft awareness, a subtle peace, a presence behind your presence, a knowing deeper than thought. This is the beginning of Christ consciousness. Do not look for a sensation. Do not look for a vision. Do not look for an experience. The presence is not known by the senses. The presence is not known by the mind. The presence is known by itself, through itself, as itself. Practicing the presence means cultivating the atmosphere in which the spirit can make itself known. Just as you cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling on its petals, you cannot force the Christ to appear by manipulating the mind. You create the conditions, the quiet soil, the gentle openness, and the flower reveals itself in its own timing. This is why Joel called it the most powerful spiritual practice in the world, not because it changes God, but because it changes your awareness of God. It removes the cloud of human thought so the sun of divine presence may shine unobstructed. Every moment you turn within, every moment you pause in recognition, every moment you silently acknowledge the One, you draw nearer not to God, but to the awareness of God. And as this inner recognition becomes familiar, as it becomes natural, as it becomes the background of your day, you begin to live from a different dimension. You begin to feel guided without reasoning. You begin to feel protected without defenses. You begin to feel supplied without striving. You begin to feel loved without conditions. Not because something has happened to the world, but because something has been revealed in consciousness. This is the work. This is the way. This is the secret that was never meant to be secret. Practicing the presence. The silent acknowledgement of the God that has always been your life. Beloved, as we journey deeper into this sacred practice, let us look with clarity upon what actually takes place within you when you begin to practice the presence. For the world imagines that spiritual transformation must be dramatic, that it must come with flashes of light, overwhelming emotion, or supernatural phenomena. But the Spirit does not work through spectacle. The Spirit works through silence. When you practice the presence, you are not adding anything to yourself. You are not improving yourself. You are not becoming something new. You are simply removing the veil of thought that concealed what was always there. The first thing that happens, though you may not notice it, is that the mind begins to slow. You see, the mind is a creature of movement. It races, it analyzes, it judges, it evaluates, it compares, it anticipates, it fears. And this constant movement creates a fog that covers the divine light within. But when you turn within, when you sit in quiet acknowledgement of the presence, the mind gradually loses its authority. It cannot maintain its frantic pace in the atmosphere of the Spirit. It begins to soften. It begins to yield. It begins to grow quiet. not through force, but through the gentle gravity of the divine. And as the mind quiets, a second transformation takes place. The sense of me begins to dissolve. This is not the annihilation of your identity. It is the dissolving of the false belief that you are a separate, isolated self trying to reach God. You start to feel a subtle spaciousness as if the boundaries of the personal self are loosening. This is the Christ gently emerging in consciousness. Then, almost unnoticed at first, the pressure to fix life begins to disappear. You have lived under the belief that life is yours to manage, that your problems depend on your intellect, your strength, your planning, your will. But in the atmosphere of the presence, this burden lifts. You begin to sense that there is a deeper order, a deeper intelligence, a deeper harmony guiding your life. You begin to feel, not intellectually, but inwardly, I am not alone, I am not separate, I am not unsupported. This is the dawning of trust, not blind trust, not belief-based trust, but the trust that arises naturally when you feel the presence living you. Next, something extraordinary occurs. Though it reveals itself with infinite gentleness, the feeling of separation dissolves. The great illusion of human life is that God is there and you are here, that God is above and you are below, that God is spiritual and you are material. But as you practice the presence, you discover that this separation never existed except in thought. The presence is not known by the senses. The presence is not known by the mind. The presence is known by itself, through itself, as itself. But when you turn within, when you sit in quiet acknowledgement of the presence, the mind gradually loses its authority. It cannot maintain its frantic pace in the atmosphere of the spirit. It begins to soften. It begins to yield. It begins to grow quiet, not through force, but through the gentle gravity of the divine. And with this realization, another change unfolds. Intuitive guidance begins to replace human reasoning. You start to know what to do without planning, without analyzing, without struggling. Answers arrive without effort. Decisions arise without strain. The right people, the right opportunities, the right timing seem to come into your experience without your manipulation. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is the activity of the Christ. When you become still enough to sense the presence, you enter the dimension where divine intelligence functions through you. Life becomes guided from within, not controlled from without. Then, as the practice deepens, emotional storms begin to quiet. Fear loses its sting. Worry loses its authority. Loneliness dissolves. Resentment softens. None of these vanish because you fought them. They vanish because they cannot survive in the light of realized oneness. You do not heal fear, you outgrow it through recognition. You do not overcome lack, you transcend it by knowing your source. You do not correct discord, you awaken to the harmony already present. This is the miracle of the practice. Outer conditions rearrange themselves because inner awareness has shifted, yet the world misinterprets this. It imagines that practicing the presence is a technique to attract supply, a method to heal the body, a way to manifest relationships or success. But the infinite way is not the law of attraction. It is the law of reality. You do not practice the presence to change conditions. You practice the presence and conditions changed by law, because the outer must conform to the consciousness that beholds it. So what truly happens inside? A peace begins to take root, quiet at first, like a seed beneath the soil, but unmistakable. A calm arises that does not depend on circumstances. A sense of completeness appears, even if nothing in the world has changed. A subtle gratitude begins to flow, not for something, but from something. This is the presence making itself known. Then finally, perhaps the most beautiful transformation occurs. The presence becomes the background of your awareness. Not a practice you do, not a moment you create, but a living atmosphere in which you dwell. You find yourself waking in the morning already aware of God. You walk through the day with a quiet sense of companionship. You face problems with calm instead of panic. You interact with others from compassion instead of reaction. You begin to feel as though life is lived through you, not by you. This is the Christ consciousness dawning in your experience, not through effort, not through ritual, not through attempting to be spiritual, but through the simple, continuous acknowledgement of the presence that has always been your life. This is what happens within you when you practice the presence. The divine within you becomes visible, audible, tangible, not through the senses, but through inner knowing. You discover that reality was never absent. It was simply unnoticed. And now, beloved, you are beginning to notice. Beloved, having understood what unfolds within you when you enter the atmosphere of the presence, let us now look at how this becomes a living practice throughout the day. For spiritual realization is not achieved in isolated moments. It is revealed in the continuity of recognition. It has been said that the presence is always here, and that is true. But we do not benefit from omnipresence simply because it exists. We benefit when awareness is turned toward it. Recognition is the bridge. Now, practicing the presence is not something you do for an hour in the morning and then forget. It is not reserved for meditation cushions or sacred moments. The presence does not live only in silence. The presence lives everywhere you are, in every activity, in every breath, in every ordinary task, and so the practice must become gentle, frequent touches of awareness, moments so simple, so small, that the mind overlooks them, but heaven recognizes them. Let us begin with this truth. 1 second of recognition carries more spiritual power than an hour of mechanical meditation. This is why we practice the presence in micro moments. When you wake in the morning, before the mind rushes toward the day, pause for a single breath and silently acknowledge, Father, here I am, and where I am, thou art. That one breath plants your foot in the kingdom before you step into the world. As you reach for your phone, pause briefly. Before you read a message, before you look at a screen, silently turn within and know, I turn first to the presence, not to the world. This quiet reordering of priorities restructures your day more than any plan, more than any discipline, more than any technique. When you walk from one room to another, let that transition be a moment of remembrance. As your foot touches the next floor, simply feel within. God walks as me, not loudly, not dramatically, just a gentle inner knowing. When you interact with another person, family, colleague, stranger, let the meeting be preceded by a brief recognition. The same presence that lives in me lives in this one before me. Then speak, then listen, then act. You will discover that human interactions soften. You will find more patience, more clarity, more compassion, not because you try to be spiritual, but because you recognize the presence in the other before the personality appears. When problems arise, when fears attempt to enter, when confusion seems to cloud your thoughts before you react, pause. Take one conscious breath, not to calm yourself, not to fix the problem, but to remember, I do not face this alone. The presence is here. And in that pause, the panic loosens, the mind steadies. The Christ becomes the actor instead of the personal self throughout the day, whether driving, eating, working, or sitting quietly. Bring attention just for a moment to the inner truth. I am not separate. I am sustained. These are not affirmations. They are recognitions. You are not trying to make them true. You are acknowledging what is already true. And this is the essence of micro-practices. Small recognitions, repeated often, accumulate into a spiritual momentum. They keep the door open. They keep the atmosphere clear. They keep you living from the kingdom instead of the world. Joel discovered that these frequent, gentle acknowledgments do more for spiritual realization than long sessions of strained concentration. For the presence is not revealed through intensity, it is revealed through consistency. You see, beloved, the mind is accustomed to pulling you outward into the realm of appearances. It wants you to react, it wants you to evaluate, it wants you to fear, it wants you to fix. But each micro moment of recognition reverses this pull. It says to the mind, be still. It says to the senses, you are not the authority. It says to the soul, I remember. And in these moments, the illusion of separation weakens. The inner atmosphere becomes fertile. Grace begins to function without your interference. Now, do not believe the lie that you must practice perfectly. You may forget 100 times a day. Still, practice once more. You may be swept into fear or reaction. Still, pause again. You may lose the awareness for hours. Still, return. Every return is a victory. Every pause is a doorway. Every recognition is a seed. And as you continue gently, without pressure, you will discover something beautiful. The practice will begin to practice itself. You will find yourself pausing naturally, recognizing automatically, turning inward without thinking. The presence will call you, draw you, nudge you, whisper to you. This is the shift from doing the practice to being lived by the presence. Then the micro moments become a continuous awareness, a silent undercurrent, a steady companionship. You carry the kingdom with you, not by effort, but by remembrance. This is the shift from doing the practice to being lived by the presence. The presence is here. And in that recognition, heaven is revealed on earth within you as you. Beloved, now we come to a profound understanding why this simple practice, so gentle, so unassuming, has the power to awaken Christ consciousness when countless methods, countless disciplines, countless spiritual efforts fall short. To see this clearly, we must first understand something about the nature of spiritual realization. Christ consciousness cannot be achieved by human effort. It cannot be forced by will. It cannot be manufactured by technique. It is not the result of mental discipline, emotional purity, or moral striving. Christ consciousness is not the effect of your work. It is the revelation of what has always been true. And herein lies the beauty and the challenge. Everything the human mind does to reach God stands between you and the realization of God. Every attempt to purify yourself through effort, every attempt to concentrate, every attempt to visualize, every attempt to manifest, every attempt to command reality, all of it reinforces the false premise that you must accomplish something. But in the infinite way, we learn. Christ is not achieved. Christ is revealed. Revealed when the personal sense of self steps aside. Revealed when the mental noise becomes still. Revealed when human striving dissolves into divine surrender. Now listen carefully, beloved. The reason practicing the presence succeeds where other methods fail is because it does not strengthen the personal self, it dissolves it. Visualization strengthens the personal will. Affirmation strengthens the sense of a self trying to create. Manifestation practices strengthen the belief that you are a separate mind directing power. Religious effort strengthens the belief that you must prove your worthiness. revealed when the personal sense of self steps aside, revealed when the mental noise becomes still, revealed when human striving dissolves into divine surrender. But practicing the presence begins from a different premise. God is already here. The kingdom is already within. The Christ is already your identity. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be created. Nothing needs to be attracted, only recognized. This is why the practice awakens what no method can manufacture. Christ consciousness is not something you achieve. It is what remains when everything falls away. When you sit in silence and simply acknowledge the presence, you are not striving, you are not forcing, you are not trying to become, you are letting go of the one who tries. The presence is here. This is why the simple practice works. It removes the obstacle, human selfhood. This is what Joel discovered after years of spiritual struggle. He practiced affirmations, metaphysics, mental treatments, concentration techniques, and all of them failed to deliver lasting realization. It was only when he stopped trying to reach God and became inwardly still that the presence announced itself. This, beloved, is the secret of all mystical attainment. The presence reveals itself only in stillness, never in effort. When you practice the presence, the mind grows quiet. When the mind quiets, the personal self fades. When the personal self fades, the Christ can shine forth, not because you made it happen, but because the veil has dropped. All spiritual failure can be traced back to one thing: the belief that the human mind must accomplish spiritual realization. But the human mind can never know God. It can never enter the kingdom. It can never produce the Christ. The mind must become still. The personal will must surrender. The sense of separation must dissolve. When you practice the presence, the mind grows quiet. When the mind quiets, the personal self fades. When the personal self fades, the Christ can shine forth, not because you made it happen, but because the veil has dropped. Other practices aim to change thought. This practice dissolves the one who thinks. Other practices attempt to purify emotion. This practice reveals the self untouched by emotion. Other practices try to discipline behavior. This practice unveils the presence beneath behavior. Though you see, Christ consciousness is not the result of working toward God. It is the result of resting in God. This is why practicing the presence works. It aligns you not with the striving self, but with the eternal self. It bypasses the mind. It bypasses the will. It bypasses the ego. It bypasses the imagination. It goes directly to reality. In the silence of recognition, God becomes visible. Grace becomes tangible. The Christ becomes your consciousness. Not because you reached up to heaven, but because you became still enough to see that heaven was always within you. This is the infinite way. This is the mystical path. This is the gentle secret the world overlooked. Christ is not attained. Christ is revealed through the silence. And practicing the presence is the doorway to that silence. Beloved, now we come to the turning point of the entire spiritual journey, the mystical shift that occurs when we move from human thinking to spiritual awareness. This is the shift that every prophet, every sage, every mystic has pointed toward. It is the shift Jesus referred to when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." It is the shift Paul described when he declared, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." This shift is not intellectual. It is not emotional. It is not moral. It is the transition from living as a human being who thinks to living as a spiritual being who knows. Beloved, Now we come to the turning point of the entire spiritual journey, the mystical shift that occurs when we move from human thinking to spiritual awareness. This is the shift that every prophet, every sage, every mystic has pointed toward. It is the shift Jesus referred to when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." It is the shift Paul described when he declared, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." It is the transition from living as a human being who thinks to living as a spiritual being who knows. Spiritual awareness is recognition, the direct knowing of reality. When you practice the presence, something marvelous happens. The mind no longer becomes the instrument through which you live. The mind becomes the servant of a higher awareness. Other practices attempt to purify emotion. This practice reveals the self untouched by emotion. When you practice the presence, something marvelous happens. The mind no longer becomes the instrument through which you live. The mind becomes the servant of a higher awareness. Instead of reacting to appearances, you respond from peace. This is the mystical shift. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not emotional. In fact, it is so subtle that the mind often misses it. The moment you stop seeking solutions in the external world and turn inward to acknowledge the presence, you step out of human thinking and into spiritual awareness. The moment you pause in the face of fear and silently know God is here, you shift from sense to soul. The moment you stop treating the appearance and begin recognizing the spiritual reality behind it, you are no longer functioning as a human mind. You are functioning as Christ. This is the transformation that practicing the presence produces. You become receptive rather than reactive. You become listening rather than thinking. You become guided rather than driven. Human thought is always in motion. Spiritual awareness is always at rest. Human thought is anxious. Spiritual awareness is peaceful. Human thought tries to manipulate conditions. Spiritual awareness sees through them. Human thought is finite. Spiritual awareness is infinite. Human thought is anxious. Spiritual awareness is peaceful. Human thought tries to manipulate conditions. Spiritual awareness sees through them. Joel often said that the human mind cannot know God. It can only behold the effects of God. But the awareness in you, the silent, witnessing presence, is already one with God. This is why practicing the presence reveals Christ consciousness. It transfers the seat of your identity from the thinking mind to the divine awareness behind the mind. This awareness does not react to the world. It beholds the world in stillness. It hears without defensiveness. It sees without judgment. It loves without condition. This is your true self. This is the self Jesus called the Father within. This is the self Paul called the Christ in you, the hope of glory. This is the self Joel called the infinite invisible, and it becomes visible, not through effort, but through stillness. The mystical shift occurs when you stop trying to reach God and allow God to reveal himself as the very awareness that watches your thoughts. The moment you recognize, I am the one who observes thought, not the thinker of thought, you have stepped out of the human condition and into spiritual consciousness. Beloved, this is the beginning of liberation. For once you know that you are not the mind, you are free from the mind's fears. Once you know you are not the body, you are free from the body's limitations. Once you know you are not the personal self, you are free from the world's opinions and pressures. You begin to live as the Christ, quietly, humbly, naturally, not by overpowering the human self, but by remembering the divine self. This is the mystical shift. It is the true rebirth. It is the awakening to the kingdom within. It is the turning from sense to soul, from thinking to knowing, from effort to grace. And once this shift has begun, even if only faintly, even if only in glimpses, your life can never again be lived from the old identity. Something in you has seen the truth, that you are not a person trying to find God. You are the presence of God revealing itself as you. This is the heart of mystical Christianity. This is the secret that Jesus taught. This is the path of the infinite way. And beloved, you are already walking it. Beloved, now that we have walked through the nature of the shift from human thinking to spiritual awareness, let us look at what happens when Christ consciousness actually begins to awaken in you. For many imagine that awakening must be a dramatic event, visions, mystical lights, supernatural signs. But the truth is infinitely simpler, infinitely quieter, infinitely more profound. Christ consciousness does not announce itself with noise. It enters your experience as silence. It reveals itself not in sensation, but in inner stillness. And so the early signs are subtle, so subtle that the mind often overlooks them. But the soul recognizes them instantly. Let us look at these signs together, with clarity and with peace. 1. A growing sense of ease, even when nothing has changed externally. This is one of the first and most unmistakable signs. You look around your life and see that circumstances remain the same responsibilities, the same bills, the same people, the same tasks. And yet something inside has softened. The pressure lightens, the burden lifts, the urgency dissolves. You begin to feel that you are carried, not carrying, that life is happening through you, not against you, that you are supported by something unseen but deeply felt. This is the Christ whispering within. Fear not, I am here. 2. The mind becomes less noisy, not because you force it, not because you discipline it, but because the presence begins to overshadow it. Thoughts still come, but they no longer grip you. Emotions still arise, but they no longer drown you. You begin to witness thought rather than believe it. You begin to observe emotion rather than identify with it. This witnessing is the emergence of spiritual awareness. The Christ in you is beginning to see through the mind rather than with it. 3. A deeper compassion emerges naturally. You begin to see others not as personalities, not as behavior, not as problems, but as expressions of the same divine presence that lives in you. You find yourself reacting less and understanding more. Judgment begins to fade. Blame begins to dissolve. You no longer feel the need to correct others. You feel the desire to understand. You no longer need them to behave differently in order for you to feel peace. Your peace is coming from within, not from the world. This is the Christ recognizing the Christ in others. 4. You become less reactive to problems. Problems still appear, but they no longer dominate your consciousness. Instead of panic, there is pause. Instead of fear, there is an inner turning. Instead of immediate reaction, there is recognition. The presence is here. I need not face this alone. This pause, this sacred hesitation, is one of the clearest signs that the Christ is awakening in you. For only the Christ can stand still in the midst of struggle. The human self reacts. The Christ beholds. 5. Guidance begins to arise spontaneously. You start knowing what to do without effort. Ideas come without strain. The next step becomes evident without planning. Solutions present themselves without analysis. The human self reacts. The Christ beholds. You begin to trust this inner knowing, this gentle prompting, this intuitive movement. This is the voice of the presence, not loud, not forceful, but unmistakably true. You start knowing what to do without effort. Ideas come without strain. The next step becomes evident without planning. Solutions present themselves without analysis. This sign often surprises students. You may be washing dishes, walking to your car, sitting in silence, and suddenly you feel a soft joy, a quiet fullness, a gentle completeness, not happiness from something, not relief from something, but joy without cause, peace without reason, wholeness without explanation. This fullness is the nature of the Christ. It arises whenever we momentarily step out of the illusion of separation. 7. You sense that something greater is living you. This is perhaps the most profound sign. You begin to feel that your life is not your own, not in a burdensome sense, but in a sacred one. You feel guided. You feel companioned. You feel accompanied. You feel that the decisions you make, the words you speak, the actions you take are arising from a deeper center than the personal self. You catch yourself saying, I don't know how I knew that, or I don't know why I acted that way, but it felt true. This is the Christ beginning to take over the instrument of your being. 8. The world loses its grip over your inner state. You notice that circumstances no longer dictate your inner condition. Chaos may swirl around you, yet something within you remains still. People may misunderstand you, but your peace is not shaken. Life may present challenges, but you are not defined by them. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. This is the hallmark of Christ consciousness. The world no longer has power over your peace. You notice that circumstances no longer dictate your inner condition. Chaos may swirl around you, yet something within you remains still. This is the infinite way. Not effort, not struggle, not persuasion, but recognition. Silence begins to nourish you. Stillness begins to strengthen you. The inner sanctuary becomes more attractive than the outer stimulation. This is not isolation. It is communion. The Christ is calling you inward. Beloved, these are the signs that Christ consciousness is dawning in you. They are quiet signs, gentle signs, living signs, but they are unmistakable. When these begin to appear, know this: you are no longer seeking God. God is revealing himself as you. The kingdom is no longer a concept. It is becoming your experience. This is the awakening. This is the transformation. This is the Christ coming alive in you. Beloved, as we come to the close of this journey, let us rest a moment in the stillness that has been quietly building within us throughout this teaching. Not the stillness of effort, but the stillness of recognition. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness of presence of God realized, even if faintly, even if softly, even if only in glimpses. We have walked together through the understanding of the kingdom within, through the practice of the presence, through the transformation of consciousness, through the unfolding of the Christ as the reality of your being. And now the time comes not to conclude, but to integrate, for spiritual teaching does not end when the words stop. It begins when the listening becomes inward. It begins when the mind stops grasping and the heart begins knowing. It begins when you turn from the words to the word, the living presence speaking within the silence. And so, let us gather all we have seen into the simplest of truths. God is the life of you. The presence is the center of you. The Christ is the truth of you. And the kingdom is already within you. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be improved. Nothing needs to be attracted. Nothing needs to be achieved. Only recognized. This is the infinite way. Not effort, not struggle, not persuasion, but recognition. Everything we have explored flows from this recognition. only recognized. When you face a problem and pause before reacting, you are not avoiding responsibility. You are placing yourself in the atmosphere of the Christ, where true guidance can be heard, not as an escape, but as a homecoming, only recognized. When you are guided without knowing how, strengthened without knowing why, comforted without seeking comfort. This is grace becoming the activity of your consciousness. Beloved, all of this is the unfolding of a single truth. You are not the seeker. You are the one being revealed. Christ consciousness is not your achievement. It is your identity coming into awareness. The world may tell you that you must strive for this. Religion may tell you that you must earn this. The mind may tell you that you are not worthy of this. But the Christ within you whispers something entirely different. You have never been separate. You have never been lost. You have never been outside the kingdom. You are the light you seek. You are the presence you pray to. You are the life expressing God. And so, as we complete this teaching, let this be the blessing that rests upon you. May you walk gently with yourself. May you pause often. May you recognize the presence in small moments. May the silence become your companion. May the inner knowing rise without effort. May you feel yourself carried, guided, sustained. May the Christ reveal itself as the very nature of your being. Christ consciousness is not your achievement. It is your identity coming into awareness. I and the Father are one. Let this truth be enough. Let this truth be your resting place. Let this truth be the foundation of your day, the anchor of your peace, the life of your life. And so, as we complete this teaching, let this be the blessing that rests upon you. Rest in this knowing, live from this knowing, and let grace carry you where effort never could. Blessings of the infinite be upon you. Blessings of the presence abide with you. Blessings of the Christ shine as you. Amen.